It's time to sing some melodies. It's time to sing some melodies. Yeah. I want you to prepare yourself. There's actually quite a bit of melodies this week. I think melodies are a good way to start thinking about modulation. So we'll be doing a bunch of melodies this week, but very few are arpeggios. Prepare for a melody bonanza! The melodies that we're going to do are going to be going from the relative major to the relative minor, or the relative minor to the relative major. Here's the first one. It's 1480 in your manual, and I'll give you a little accompaniment for this, and then you can sing it on your own. So if we're in this key, this would be do, so you'd have do, mi, re, mi, right? Now scan through the example, and you'll notice that at the end, you've got where we're ending on F. So, and you've got this little cadential formula around it where you're going ba-da-dum. If this was 2 weeks ago, we would think that this was some sort of applied chord. However, we're asking you to hear this as a modulation now. And that means that we're going to change solfege at some point to focus on F as tonic as opposed to A flat as tonic. It seems like the last two measures there might be aiming towards F. So let's change that A flat in the second to last measure to become a May. 1, 2, 3. Fa, do. May, ti, re, do. And what we're asking you to do cognitively is like rearrange your head parts so that you're like imagining that the first part of this, all of your like tonal hierarchies in there are arranged around A flat, and then 3 hours later, all of your tonal hierarchies rearranged to rearrange around F minor at the end of this. Here's another one. Now we're starting out in F. But we don't end in F, do we? We've got this C sharp that's introduced in what's noted as measure 7 here, and then we have a cadential formula at the end here where we're going May, Re, Do in D. So if I scan through this, I would think, okay, the first two measures look like they're in F, so I'm going to use F scale degrees, F solfege, so it'll be so, fa, mi, re, so. And then in measure 7, I'm going to change to the C sharp being T. T, do, re, fa, mi. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then try that without me playing. I'll leave this to you. So I want you to do what we just did, where you scan through it, you look at where it looks like there's cadential formula, where it looks like there's new accidentals introduced, and then I want you to change solfege to your new key when it seems like there's a significant shift, a tectonic shift in where you're hearing do. And now a message from Casual Chris. So how do you know if something is a secondary dominant or a modulation? Well, there are definitely ambiguous instances of this where like you could imagine hearing it as a modulation, but somebody else could hear it as a tonicization. But here's the thing. It's really a question of whether you are like hearing a new do, whether like all of the brain blocks that you've got, which are aligned to hear like E flat as do, are moving to a different organization to hear B flat as do. So when your brain blocks move, that means that you're modulating. Like if you just hear a phi going to so, your brain blocks haven't moved. You're hearing that fee still in relationship to do. Sure, it's being pulled from another key, but you're not being asked to hear a new tonal center. You're still hearing the old tonal center. And the two big ways to distinguish between a modulation and a tonicization or a secondary dominant is whether you have a full cadential formula, like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in your new key, and that means that you've modulated. And then the other thing is to look for consistent accidentals. If you're in C major and you have like one F sharp in a sea of F naturals, then it's just fee. It's just fee. It's like very fleeting. But if all of your Fs have changed to F sharp for a couple of measures, then you're probably moving to G, because now it's an F sharp in a sea of F sharps. So you're just not using F natural anymore, you're using F sharps. So the two things, is it a accidental in a sea of other things, or is it an accidental in the sea of that accidental? And do you have cadential formula that are reinforcing your new key? I also wanted to do my favorite things, a Richard Rodgers tune. This is a chart transcription of Coltrane doing it. So we start in E minor, and then it aims towards the relative major. And so we're hearing this in G, as your tonic, and then it aims back towards the relative minor. Then in sort of all E minor, but then we end up in G major. This is a great example of where we would talk about applied chords versus actual modulation. Note that there's an A7. Simply remember my favorite things. And that doesn't mean that we're modulating to D major, right? It doesn't mean that we're hearing like that we suddenly like want to be in D. No, it means that we have this chord that's being used as a color moment. It's like coloring the feeling. It's brightening what's going on, and we make sense of it as a 5 of D, which would be 5 of 5, which we're going to get in a second. So there's your 5. That A7 is an example of a secondary dominant or an applied chord, right? Whereas these sections in orange are examples of modulation, because you actually feel this full chunk move towards, you rearrange your head parts to be in the relative major. You can also think of it as like an introduction of accidentals momentarily, or whether accidentals are like becoming your new accidentals. So if you look at this example, you've got that A dominant 7th. What it's doing is introducing a C sharp into the texture, but it's a C sharp in a sea of C naturals. Because if the chord right before it is a C major chord, it's going to have a C in it. You have a G going to a C, going to a D7. These all have C naturals in it. 3 hours later. All right, so now let me give you the chords for this. You can sing along with my chords and then sing along on your own. 1, 2, 3, here we go. Repeat. I did do the turnaround back to the B7. Sorry. Now let's talk about things modulating to 5. Here's this little heightened thing. You scan through. We start in D. Great. Okay. And then a G sharp. All right. And is this a G sharp that's in a sea of G naturals? No, this G sharp is there to stay. So it looks like we are modulating to the key of A. And golly gosh, we end with a cadential figure in A also. All right, so we're starting in 1 and then going to 5. Let's try to sing this through. 1, 2, 3. Good, and then try that on your own. Where I think you're going to switch solfege on the pickup to the second line, so the pickup to measure 5, where this won't be mi, re, mi, fi, but you could rather call it la, so, la, ti, do, so, la, so, la. Okay, I think that's where you would switch. I also want to be clear that where you switch is sometimes a little ambiguous. It's, for instance, if you were just sitting in the chairs in an audience listening to this, when we ever get to go listen to music again together, you probably first hear it as mi, re, mi, fi, so, but then your brain parts rearrange, and then the second time you hear it, you're probably hearing it as la, so, la, ti, do, and then you're solidly in a mi, re, do, ti, la, so. After that, that will be flexible in terms of like where you're modulating, but where you modulate is making some kind of like interpretive claim that, hey, at this point, I'm hearing it in blah blah key. I'll let you do this one on your own, 1496. So you'll scan through, think, okay, where do I see new accidentals changed? Now I do want to draw your attention to that C sharp down there. Now this is an example of a chromatic ornamentation or a local secondary dominant, because it's a C sharp in a sea of C naturals. So don't let that make you think that we're going to D minor or something like that. We are not. We're going from B flat to the key of 5. We're going from B flat to F. So you're looking for where the requisite accidentals are added, and then where you have cadential formula, and make a decision about where you'll change solfege. Proceed with the melody bonanza. She's not impressed. Now there's this little ditty. It's by a composer named Bob Cole, who was active in the early 20th century. He was an African-American man, a well-renowned musician, and was involved in some of the first musicals which were produced and performed. So the whole company were Black Americans. All I want you to do is do the melody. And what happens is we modulate to 5. So you've got here, you got this A dominant 7th, which you're going to hear as 5 of 5, because we cadence in G under Mary just about a year ago. So we're going from a D7 to a G chord. So we hear this as a PAC in G, which means that when we go back and we hear that A dominant 7th, Tompkins, well, we're not going to hear that as a modulation. We're going to hear that as a secondary dominant. So this would still be mi, la, and then si, la, because we're not changing keys yet. Now let's go to the second phrase. Now he has a little baby. Now we've got ourselves PACs in the key of D. So now the second half of the phrase for with we has a little baby. Now at this point, I think we should switch to D major solfege. For so Tommy's quite a happy man, you know. You could even switch at baby. So if we switched it baby, it would be la, re, re, so, fi, so, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. The sound and video qualities are a little weird this week, and it's because I had to fire Jen and Doug because of budget constraints, which is sad on the one hand, but also fine on the other hand, given that they're entirely fictional. So what I want you to do is sing through just the melody. I'll put this in the online materials. Finally, I want you to sing the Florida Temperance Ode. This is a hymn which was drawn from the temperance movement. It's from a hymn book that was published by the Women's Temperance Union. Regardless how you feel about temperance, which is the legalization of alcohol, regardless of how you feel about temperance, it was a really neat movement which was driven by politically active women, and it was really entwined with the movement for women's suffrage as well. It's a hymn or like a rally song that was associated with the delegation from Florida when they would have national conferences of the Women's Temperance Union. Clearly in G. Go to the second line. Now I think it's arguable whether you would hear that as 5 of 5 or 5. 5 of 5 or a modulation. Let's, for practice sake, say that this is a modulation. And so the last two measures of that second system, let's use D major solfege. So this will be fa, mi, fa, going on from there. This third line, you've got that brief F natural. Not a modulation. This is just a brief tonicization, a brief secondary dominant applied chord. So G dominant 7s, it would be a 5 of 4 in G. So keep the second line in G. Now, okay, now we've gone to E minor. So we've gone to the relative minor. So the fourth line here, let's read that in E. So it'll be me, do, re, re. And if you're doing the alto, it would be do, do, ti, do, 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 do in the bass. Two more lines here. Now this is interesting because we are going from an E center. And here it sounds like a PAC and D. The last line of that first system there, you will change to D major solfege. So we start with re, mi, do, re, mi, fa, so, do, so, and then so, la, ti, do, to capture the fact that we're aiming towards D. That last line is all going to be in G. So now let me play this all the way through for you if you want to sing along, or if you just want to use this to get in your ear, that's fine too. All right, I'm going to use a nice early 20th century sound, a little chapel organ sound. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it's a lot of melodies this week. A lot of melodic work, though, is good for getting this modulation stuff into your ears. I'm going to go light on arpeggios this week. So we've got a bunch of melodies, but very few arpeggios. Finally, on Owl, I'll put dictations. They're from Clara Schumann, famous pianist and composer. And then Ignatius Sancho. He's a composer. He's a composer. He was born in West Africa, and he was the first known Briton of African heritage to have voted in a British election. So he's not only a composer, but he is also of some political note as well. So those are the origins of the two melodic dictations you'll be seeing on Owl.
Who's a good girl? Who's a good girl who likes her belly rubbed? Who likes her belly rubbed?